We are live.
Should we start?
Yeah.
All right. So, hello everyone. First of all, a very warm welcome to all of you who join Microsoft AI Days. Before we dive in, I would like to acknowledge my co-host Pratap for putting this together along with me. And now, coming to the most exciting part, it's my pleasure to introduce our speaker for Mr. Lalit Rawat, a highly accomplished cloud solution architect and technology professional. He's also a recognized Microsoft MVP and Azure expert with a very strong experience in designing and implementing scalable cloud solutions. So beyond his technical expertise, he's also a very passionate trainer and a speaker. We are excited to have him with us today to share his insights and expertise. So without taking much time, please join me in welcoming Lalit Rawat. Lalit, the stage is all yours.
Thank you so much, Yop, for your warm introductions. Let me share my presentation. Let me know if you are able to view my presentation.
Yeah, we can see.
Yeah. So, what we are discussing is the industry challenges across startups and then to the enterprises and mid business level medium, like who wanted to really comply in terms of security, governance, scalable solutions, and all of those things. So, well architect frameworks covers all of those things. Okay. So, think it is let's you are building your own house and you want a land, but if you build out an architecture without the security, which means you do not have the gates are open, anyone can enter to your house, right? That's where you put the doors so it will be secure. And if the doors does not have the lock, it is again people will assume that you have the doors but do not have the lock. They can easily open and go, right? Then if you looked out, your house will also be stable, reliable, cost optimized because you have some of those budgets in your pocket. It shouldn't be go all of those things. So the same way with Microsoft Azure, well architect frameworks, we are discussing how you are going to build your product using this particular frameworks, or you can build your enterprise ecosystems across these pillars. Thank you, Yog, for your warm introductions. I think Yog has already covered pretty much, and I have wrote two books on Microsoft Azure, and I've been speaking with multiple events. I was in Delhi yesterday, was in Expert Live India, and today is with the session. So thank you, Yog, once again, and let's discuss what is the well architect frameworks and what we are going to talk about it. In well architect frameworks, we are talking in terms of five pillar, such as cost optimizations, operations excellency, performance, reliability, and security, and how you are going to remediate specific issues around it, and what would be your expected outcome. With this, let's say you are a software developer, right? And when you design a product, you have two kind of requirement. One is functional requirement, which says what is your applications needed, what is the base requirement. So earlier when I gave you the example that you wanted to build a house, can you build your house on a sea or near the sea land? That is highly riskable because as and when something goes wrong, the waves will come and wipe out your house, right? Whether when you're building your house you would need a place where you can things will be in a fallen place in terms of security and all of those things. The second part comes up in terms of architecture characteristics, right? How your operations and the design criteria meet that particular space, right? You cannot go and build your house in between of your forest, right? Because you don't have the connectivity. So you have to look down the place where you will easily communicate the connectivity all across in and around. It is reliable, secure, cost optimized, operations excellencies, and all of those things. So when you develop your product, it will be same way like you are building your house to have the architecture ready. That's met all the criteria. Let's move into the next slide. And why the things will go bad, right? Let's say, I think there is a recent example with some of the AI model where someone wants to uh, they wanted to build out integrations, and they run the code, give the access to this particular model, and then they wiped out the databases, right? That is in one real time example. What will happen when something is triggered from the world or from the internet or the cyber attackers or whatsoever, right? Something you missed. Either you do not have the complete processor, or the regularity narrowness where your organizations does not follow the actual regulators but it's there on the paper. Could be a mixed messages, productions pressures. Let's say in startups or other companies, your manager says that you wanted to deliver in 2 hours, but even your manager knows as well as the team knows that will not be possible. So when you work on the pressure, you missed one, two, or three things, which might you feel it's not critical. Let that productions will go on, will mitigate later on, and what will happen after the live you forgot. And that's where the chaos comes. Second things is responsibility shifting and indicator training. When you have the productions pressures, what you'll do, you just do it and hand it over to the DevOps or the operations team, and that's where you're just shifting the responsibilities to the operations teams. And operations teams only knows what you have built it out. They even don't know what are the one, two, three things which you have missed. And they might not be well prepared in terms of understanding or trained in your product. And that is the another biggest mistakes. Then some logs came, some error came, but your team might be busy in other tasks, or few people who are in the shift or taking it, they might even be distracted with the and that one small incident which has to be happen might be misplaced, and they don't care about those things who might be missed from their eyes, right? That is another mistake. Once this is done, then will comes in terms of the technical part. When your developer or someone is building out the product, they have clumsy technology, might be they are trained on it or not. They have left couple of coding bugs, deferred the maintenance and all of those things. So if you looked out from institutions to organizations to professions, teams, and individual to the technical, when you missed one or another things due to any of those reasons, the accident will happen. And that is where it is happening across the globe. And you just looked out a couple of websites who gives you the report. Every day there is a cyber attack, every day there's something is missing, data losses cases, and all of those things are happening in and around, right? So if you have any questions, you can put it in the chat and we can answer that. Then what you have to do when you're starting building out your product? One, you have to define your strategy. Why would you need that particular product? What are the business justifications? What are the business outcome or the expected outcomes you are planning to? Then you will plan how this strategy will be implemented, what are the adoption criteria or what are the adoption plan you have, what are the services you are going to use, and how you're going to build out those things. And that will come in terms of the landing zone. And then I can again refer the example of building your house, that you are building the skeleton, the landing zone of your house. That say your landing zone will looks like this, where you have the walls and that has been segregated to hall, kitchen, and all of those areas, right? And once you build out this, then your platform is ready, which means once you build in the skeleton of your house, now you can go for an interior because it is ready to live. So you'll start preparing the environment. What are the changes you needed? What color you needed? And all of those things, you start preparing the environment changes and all of those things. Once you are ready, right, then you start adopting, because earlier you was a rent, now you have moved to your own house, right? So you start adopting and you looked out what are the innovations you do, what are the migrations and all of those things, and you start managing. When you start managing and operate or doing an operations, if you do not have the strategy, right, how you're going to operate, how you're going to manage, right? All of those things comes into the part. At last, it comes as in governance, that how you are going to do the governing in terms of how you're going to control, secure, and all of those things, right? So that's where, if you looked out, this five pillar is really critical whenever you are designing any of the solutions or the well architect frameworks. Now, if you look out, you have five pillars, which is cost optimizations, operations excellency, performance efficiency, reliability, and security. Whereas cost optimizations, there is a tool called Azure Advisor, and then you have the designed principle in terms of operations excellency. You refer the architecture for the better architecture related stuffs. Referring is some things, it does not mean that your solutions will match what you are going to refer, but it might gives you the clear visibility that this is the architecture has been designed according to my need. What are the changes or the customizations we can do and adopt that will save you a lot of time, and it has the principles and everything's ready. You follow the documentations, and if you have the partner or the service offers, then you can go and talk to your partners and all of those things. So these are the areas where you would need to, very strict to people will follow and have the strategy and all of those things. Now, this is just a design of well architects frameworks. What could be your best practices in terms of your workload? As I have already informed that there will be, we will be discussing only these five across the sessions. So how you are going to implement the monitoring cost optimizations? Have you set up and monitoring or forecast for your environment? Do you have any cost control systems? Are you using Azure Hybrid for the cost optimizations? If you have the licenses, you can use your on-premises licenses to Azure VMs, and you can reduce the cost up to 40 to 50%, or based on the instance, the cost will be reduced. The benefit, the reserve instances, how you're going to shut down your VMs which is not being used. You can resize your VMs or the services that will not be used, moving into the PaaS solutions. Then you have a DevOps, the deployment. If you come out in terms of operation excellency, you have the continuous automations using the DevOps. Monitoring your processes, do you have the cadence in place or not? Because if you're not operational ready, if something is got break, and you'll come to know after 5 days, you're gone. There's a millions of dollar loss. So building a product is one part, optimization is one part, but how you're going to maintain and sustaining that particular product, if something goes wrong, you should be aware on that day so you can quickly fix and take an appropriate actions. If you talk about in terms of performance applications, that's where the designing for scaling monitoring or scaling solutions comes into a place. Then you have the reliability where you're defining the test use cases, simulating your product, deploying the monitoring and all of those things. And then the security, how you're controlling the external vendor identities, internal users identities, how you're going to manage the infrastructure, application security, how your data is going to be encrypted, and then security operations and all of those things comes and falls into the place of security, which also cover in terms of Cloud for Defender and all of Cloud for Endpoint and all of those services. Now, when you're doing a business, what does it mean? You're just making a trade off or the trade on, right? Let's say you're deploying an workload which might be testing environment. You start with small. When you deploy a critical workload which is needed your highly scalable solutions, and that time you will use the business premium and all of those things, and that will definitely increase your cost. But when you use a secure workload, that will increase your cost 10 to 15% or 20% overall, but it makes sure whatever the things which you are building as protects, right? So if your environment is not protect, someone hacked, data will be leaked, and there will be a case which you have to pay off. Rather than companies investing on the security to make sure their environment is secure, and then they will mitigate those issues well in advance, and that's where the things will comes into and falls into place. Then you're building an architecture systems where what will be your customer responsibilities, so the platform features you want to bring in and how you're going to build the platform foundations. So the important part is to understand your applications and the workload which you wanted to build out on the platform. What kind of the databases you needed, what kind of the load balancers is required, how you are going to encrypting your data and all of those things. Then looked out the features in the services, whether these are the features are available on the app services or the function app or different applications. And platform foundations is plays a crucial role, because that's where you're designing your foundations. Let's say you do not have hub and spoke model and you have hundreds of virtual networks and they are their own. Taking another example, you're organizing some family events and everyone you have given the rights, they can take their own decisions. People will come and say, okay, we need to put the cake into the north side, to the central, someone says south, and everyone comes and gives their own view and they'll say, no, you take this decision. What will happen? People will get confused, right? So when they'll get confused, the things will be spoiled. And that's where the foundations is the one, when you set it at correctly, a place, a dedicated place for your cake cutting, or dedicated place for your photo shoots and all of those things, people will go and follow there. They know this is the one place which have to go. They don't have to ruin the multiple places where your event will crash. And that's how the foundation is really, really important. So how you're going to build a foundations will lead to the next steps in terms of the platform features and the customer applications and all of those things comes later. First, whether your foundation is strong enough to hold the pillars or not, that is what is most important part in terms of well architected frameworks. And then you can put out the rules and all of those things in place. Think this is a process of well architected framework workshop where you can discover, analyze, prioritize, and optimize, right? So if you looked out from discover to analyze to prioritize, it's just a review process. Whereas when you do an optimization, that's where you are start fixing your issue or remediating the issues. For an example, what kind of the stakeholders you needed, and you can customize that. You would need who is the product owner or the solution owner, the solution architect, the cloud architect. You should have a network architect, data architect, security architect, means sure security, DevOps, and the project manager. But if you have the small team or the you have the startups, I think probably one architect can do a lot of job, and you will have the DevOps engineer and probably a cloud engineer will start the job. You can take care of other roles. You can start building out your products. Now, what will be the key outcome when you implement those principles? First of all, it mitigates around 70 to 80% of your risk. Then, if you have the monitoring in place, then it will send you what is the P0, P1, or P2 issues which you have to prioritize. Let's say your VM is exposed to an internet and someone is trying to do a, let's say in your applications, they might be doing a brute force attack, or they're just trying to logged into the RDP into your systems, right? And there is might be one issues where you might have to implement the tags and all of those things. That is not those mission critical. Could be on P2 or P3 that you can do it later. But if you expose something to the internet where everyone can see and attack to your VMs, what will happen? And they might get an opportunity to control your end-to-end applications once they are inside. So that's where the P0 comes for your critical incidented, and you have to remediate immediately. What it does is, even though it's identify what are the key recommendations, what are the focused area you'll have to do, and then you can provide the guidance, implementations, and all of those things will be in place. Right. Before we can do this well architect frameworks discovery, basically it has some of forms which has the prioritized questions which says that what are the criteria you wanted to identify your workload in terms of cost optimizations, applications, and all of those things. We'll discuss on that part. And then if you looked out, these are the report which you can show it into the five criteria of cost optimizations, operations excellency, performance, reliability, and the security. Okay. For a minute, let me just stop the presentations and let me share my report. So we'll have this particular demo. Okay, now I'm into the assessment. When I just click on assessment, it'll ask me to sign in. I'm just going to sign in from one of my credentials. Okay. And once I sign in, I have already done a couple of those things which has been completed. But if you wanted to load an assessment, so just say start assessment. It will take a while. Okay. Now, which category you wanted to do it? You can change the name for, say, I'll just put it WAF today and I'll start. Okay, now, do you wanted to add anything or you wanted to just do the call where architect frameworks? I'll just unmute this and let me just go to the next one. Now you can see these options: reliability, security, cost optimizations, and performance. So I'd say let's do it in terms of performance efficiency. Okay, then there is some one questions which has been left behind. Okay, just asking you just complete these questions and then do it. And then it has only 4 or 5 questions, so we can quickly do that. I'm just choosing the random one to answer that, or probably if you if I can show you. So these are the questions which has been asked. How do you keep your workload simple and efficient? Do you have the delegated tool, or do you have the abstracted, and all of those things will be there. And then the next questions will come. I'm just not reading it. I'm just putting it up based on that. So we'll quickly finish this labs. But whenever you're doing it, you will have to read it properly and answer it, and that's where your scores will be there. Now the second question is how you're going to implement the redundancies of your solutions. So we have used provider this, and we don't have any state computer layer component, which is good. And how you are finding the scaling strategy, this will also comes into the place. Then how you are implementing the self preventions, how do you test, what will be your test strategy, and how you are planning for disaster recovery and defining your systems RTO and RPO. And then we have the last questions. So it also says, do you have the design recover architecture? Are you preparing for your infrastructures for recovery options? And then last one is how you're going to monitoring the whole infrastructure, and then we looked out the guidelines. Guidelines will take few minutes, but in the meanwhile, if you can look out other reports, and then you also have the multiple other assessments when people will do for landing zone, well architect frameworks, DevOps capabilities, cloud adoptions, and all of those things. So how this assessment will start? Talk about you. You can get that score and take the access, recheck, and then start improving it. I think we have that results. So we looked out the results as critical, where I just got 34 marks out of 200 because it's just given the random data. You can export this also, or there is a 53 recommendations where you have to follow that. You don't have this injections, fault injection testing, and all of those things. So you have to implement as much as you can. And then once you do that, you rerun this assessment again and get your score. Until and unless it will be approx moderate, you're not going to pass this. And Microsoft has have this particular assessment and their audit processes also. So if you wanted to become a CSP and all of those things, or that whenever the audits will happen, this is really important part. Okay. Now let's come back to the PPT. Then we have already discussed in terms of this and how you're going to discovering in this architect whether this follows under the well architect frameworks or not. Let's say you're playing a crucial role for your customer deployment and they ask, can you provide me a document and their design? So we looked out. This particular design as follows 80 to 90% of the well architect frameworks where authentications will happening through an internet. You use the CDN front door and this request is going to app services, then function app. Then you have also build out a Redis cache to avoid any delay in the responses, and then you have the SQL databases and Cosmos DB and all of those things. And then you have the Azure applications around for the well architect frameworks, and then you implement the Azure search to make sure the Redis caches and all of those things will be fall in place. So when you do that, you'll have the review resource and you can gather that information, discover the workload, how your productions workload are deployed, operate and measured, what are the issues, how you to disaggregate application architecture, and all of those things will be a part of your discovery. And discovery is an important point for all the project. As perfect and the honest discovery you have, that will set the tone for your perfect product. Same like you cannot build your house in between a forest or in river, right? But you will need to find out a right place which has been, connected from all the places and stable, reliable, and secure. And that's how the discovery does this. So if your discovery is not perfect, that means something is missing on your products while building up. Then they have couple of tools, let's say Azure Advisor and then third-party tool, Cloud Base, AZ, Well Architect Frameworks tools, and all of those things which you can utilize and optimize your Azure resources. Then you'll have the Azure Advisor, which gives you the best practices in terms of cost, security, performance, high availability, and operations excellency. And you can just go to the Microsoft Azure portal and search for Azure Advisor. It gives you all of those things. And again, that is the five pillar of Microsoft Well Architect frameworks, where it was just saying that how those pillars can be used. Whereas in cost optimization, you used to optimize your cost, pay for consumptions, then operations excellence, design for automation testing, performance, how you're doing the testing, reliability, and then security, design for security principles, zero trust, and all of those things will be part of this. Whereas reliability comes in terms of how you're going to define your BCDR or disaster recovery plan. Then, if you have the workload which need a quality to be implemented in there, right? So if you're not managing the cost may incur, right? Let's say, and I have seen this example in hundreds of the organizations. They have created the Azure portal, give it to his team, and team is doing the testing left and right. They even without knowing what it will cost to an organization, right? You have a budget of $100. You create a subscription, give it to your team. That subscriptions will end over, or the budget will goes to $100 in just one day, but you plan for a whole month, right? That's a problem comes. So you do not have the clear understanding how this has been done, the lack of infrastructure. There are a lot of issues in terms of operations, deployment is not automated, and all of those things. You do not have any monitoring, unclear resiliency, security controls, and all of those things will not be there. And that's where these innovators comes into the place that you have to mitigate. Then if you looked out the well architect frameworks, cost optimizations we have already discussed. So these are the 1, 2, 3 level that how you're going to optimize. First you set up an alert or set up a budget alerts for your 12 months. Make sure you have $100, $200, $500 of this. When you reach to 40%, 50%, just send out a report, you analyze and do all of those things. Second one is take the action of resizing, rescheduling, auto shutdown for your VMs when you are not using, reservation and licenses. If you have on-premises licenses, you can use here and save the 40% of cost. What kind of the size you needed in terms of development, testing, and the prod environment. Don't go the same size at production you wanted to do until unless it has the business justifications, right? So you can start with the small and then test it out, and the productions you would really need a good infrastructure. That's how you can plan. Then, whenever you have an unused resources, garden confirmations from your team, get that deleted. Don't put an additional backups and all of those things that will cost you too much. Even cost will differ based on your regional locations. What are the traffics are coming through the VNet on premises to Azure content caching, and then you'll have the architecture changes and design pattern which you can reduce the cost. You have the worker, queuing, caching, and all of those things. You can do that to save some of those costs. And reservations are available for these are the couple of services, and there are more services. This is few of the services which fits to my slides. I'll put in. You have BEF pillar for the reliability, which talks about what will be your business requirement, how your applications has an issues and it went down, and we can discuss the SLA target and all of those things. And how you're going to calculate, let's say Microsoft gives this particular SLA for high availability, and how you're going to this thing. So let's say you have an app services and SQL databases where the formula is simple, A plus B, and then if you web app services as 99 and another one is 99.99%, right? You just put it A plus B equal to, so let's say 0.6%, still you would need it. And then A plus B, you can, multiply, and that's where your SLA comes is 99.94%. But if you looked out, you have app services is 99.95% and 99.99%. But that is your actual SLA for your environment. If you take in another example for this, you have the app services queue and databases. Same formula we have implemented, and that's where your environment SLA comes as 99.95%, right? For overall. So make sure how you're going to calculate the SLA and all of those things, but majorly in your environment it is not needed. So when you talk about in terms of reliability, you have architectural review, audits, high availability, how you're going to port, how you're going to calculate, chaos of engineering, whether you have the high availability needed, cost versus resiliency, how you're going to have those things. Did you implement the BCDR? Do you have the RTO and RPO in place, detections, responses? What are the design patterns you will have? And based on that, you set up your reliability. So the application is slow. Sometimes user says, but why that application is slow? Sometimes that a particular applications might not be slow due to your implementation attached because of user. I really remember in one example when I was working with as a desktop support engineer, one of the senior manager comes that the laptop internet is really slow. So fine, and it is not able to connect. Sometimes it's connecting and disconnecting. So at that time, we are using RJ45 to get connected to the laptop. So he's properly connecting to the laptop, but there is the port which have the underlying ports on the floor. That's where it is losing these things, right? And he has the complaint that the internet is disconnecting. So I just looked out. I'll say everything is working fine. In the first place, it didn't come to my mind. Then when I looked out, I'll just fix this loose points, start working perfectly. So sometimes it's not a problem of your applications, but it will be that conditions or the objects or those, maybe the users or probably that prospects has got changed. So you'll have to look out each and every criteria in terms of that to capture that where the performance or the bottleneck comes into the place. Then you have the baffler, and basically you don't need that. Then performance uh, depends on your VM sizing, disk IO, CPU, what are the response time needed, network bandwidth, latencies, whether you want and what or vertical scaling versus horizontal scaling. Do you need a multi-geo deployment or the single region deployment, and how you're going to scale your independent VMs or the unit? How you're going to backing up your databases? What are the applications you design? The data sharing and all of those things will be part of it. Then comes an important point of the security, right? So how are you going to do that? So security is not only the Microsoft responsibilities, it's across the client, where Microsoft will take care of the physical data center security, the policies and access within this. Apart from that, you talk about in terms of IaaS, Microsoft will manage 40% of your infrastructure, 60% as your. It becomes in pairs, it is 80% and 60 to 70%, and in SaaS it will be 80%, right? And that's how the WebFlow security is the responsibility equally of your client as well as Microsoft. And how are you going to secure, how are you going to implement authentications, multi-factor authentications and all of those things. Role-based access control will be in place. How are you going to encrypt the systems, the server side, and all of those things? The networking parameters, whether you are using the key vault or not, whether you are rotating the keys, because I have seen in many examples where people did not rotate the key has been shared with multiple environment, and what will happen? That key is misplaced and probably someone is using for something else, and they got access to your environment. Then there is a tools for vulnerability detections, SIM, SOAR, and patch management, and all of those things will be part of it. And last, that how what will be your deployment cycle? Do you have any tool for code scannings, vulnerability assessment, deployment, OAuth, and OpenID? And then that's how you are defining your well architected frameworks, operations excellencies, that DevOps integrations, automations are in place, monitoring, and all of those things. So in operation excellency, the important factor is your monitoring. If you do not have the monitoring in place, everything will be wiped out. Because if you don't get an alert, something went wrong, you will not be able to fix it. So first your monitoring should be strong, and then the resource optimizations, naming conventions, all of those things there. Then you'll have to have your deployment strategy in place. If something goes wrong, what will be your rollback process, and far as a code and all of those things will be there. And then at last you should also have the testing and everything. If you do not have the testing, then how you're going to do the performance testing and all of those things. And probably if you yourself doesn't know what is your tool set capable of, how much loads it will handle, then if you put into the production will be a lot of challenges. And then at last you should have the BCDR strategy should be in fall in place, and then have the DR drills, which is also a part of in compliance. And you can prioritize those recommendations, those steps, that how you wanted to do it, and this is just graphical view of it. So this will be your next steps. Maybe you can organize and analyze your what are the informations you have, do the review, and then you can design accordingly. So your design should follow in terms of scoping, initiating, and then discovery and insight, designing, implementation, sprint, and then so on. Impact and success basically it depends based on the recommendations you got and how you have implemented without disruptions of any of the production environment, and you mitigate within the timeline. So you have to agree to the success metrics and then you integrate and do that. It's just a review summary, and I think that will be your remediation steps. Any problems comes, you review whether do you have the backup of the services, communicate to the end users, then you can document, fix, and test, and validate and communicate back to your users that your things has been steps. Backup and another one, communications is another part of if you do not communicate and directly deploy anything, people will have the chaos why my application is not working. So that's an important part, and then you can take the immediate actions. I think that will be a last PPT with this, and if you have any questions, I will be happy to help you out with the questions.
All right, I think this was really very good insight. Thank you, Lalit, for walking us through around security, architecture part of it, the performance, and how to organization should look into multiple aspect in terms of securing their assets and the resources, right? Having said, Lalit, just couple of questions that popping up is you are working day in day out with the startups and the enterprises. You might have been seeing few of the uh, often missed out security labs in the architecture, right? So what you see, what practices are being missed out of?
I would say the first practices which I have seen as they don't have the strategy. So majority of the people they come, they say, no, I wanted to build out the product. Let's start doing. They hire the developer, front end, back end, databases, and all of those things. They hire team. One is the UI guys and all of those things. They build out. I say start developing, right? So before you do that, you understand what are the product you are going to build out. What is the
Mhm.
purpose of the product? How their UI looks like, right? And then only you can start your development. Because what will happen when you start your development and then later you can find out that this UI is not matching with what we have developed. So you are making again changes on the development code. So once you finalize your UI, security, reliability, and the performance and all of those things, the strategy, at least I would say not to an 100% level because that's not the truth, but at least if you're able to define 70 to 80% of your parameter, 30% can be go on, and that's the product is needed to make those changes. But you should have your defined strategy that how you are going to build out your end-to-end applications without making the further changes, because once your environment is live and user are onboarded, at that time if you make any of those changes, what will happen, you're not giving a good user experience, right? People will say, okay, this button is there earlier, but now this button has moved to somewhere else. And every time they have to struggle to find out those things. Well, it's better to will have the stable environment in terms of following this pillar, and then best strategy will be a best way to go.
And is it, Lalit, uh, as per your perspective and opinion, is it more of a gap in terms of knowledge or in terms of training or a mindset? Because what you're saying is true that I see most of the startups today, they focus more into building products and hence they ignore the other aspect of it. So is it a mindset, training, or a knowledge gap that you say?
I would say it's a combination of all, because when you wanted to build out some things and you are spending the your hard-earned money to some of those products, right? they want as soon as to be in the market. So they build out the prototypes, putting into the market, and then if that product hits, the startups even didn't know when it's become the product. From prototype to the product, right? So they
True.
even didn't know. So initially they thought, okay, let's build out something, it's a prototype, and then do the testings and all of those things. And if it got hit, game is changed. They cannot make things overnight, right? So if you get that's what strategy is important, and then the knowledge, because when people are building out, they might hire the interns, freshers, or the experienced people. They might be an expertise on one areas, not all the aspects. They might be expert in developing and securing your environment and the code, but are they really have the knowledge in terms of infrastructure deployment or what are the things you needed? Because in the product, from infrastructure to deployment to security to building out the prototypes and so on, you would need the skills in all the places. If you choose the wrong size of infrastructure, your applications will went down. And the truth of today's market, majority of the companies are falling in all of those three traps, including the enterprise applications. I have seen many enterprises, they do not follow any well architect frameworks. They'll say, no, my we have to move to an Azure. We just moved on Azure. Now, how you are going to do that? So we don't have hub and spoke model. We are not using load balancing. We are not encrypting. No one is attacking us. Why should we use? And these are the answers I got from the corporates. Okay. So the things is when you got these kind of okay, if the people is not attacking today, it's not necessary when you got success. You're not in their eyes. You're there, but they don't see the value of your product. As and when they see the value of your product, they'll just hit, and they are well prepared and then planned. So before someone comes into your house, you will be properly secure, reliable, and even if half your strategy, if you blocked, how you can quickly unblock and enable your users. And that's where the DR and all of those things comes. That if this environment not working, you have the automations and shift to the different region and build out properly, probably in 15, 20 minutes or 30 minutes to scale that up. Initially, it's good. So I would say it's all the places, because startups or mid-level enterprise, they cannot, you know, they have the less budget or probably they cannot have the resources, those kind of things, right? And that's where, as a product owner, it's responsibility to make sure that these things will be there, fallen in place, and then review their product again and again.
Perfect. Yeah.
Connect with it. Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe last question, Lalit, from my side. So, is there any certification that you would want to recommend to the audience who are starting up with Azure or already developing on the platform, which would help them in terms of taking care of the security, compliance, and the rest of the aspect while developing?
I would say the Azure is too vast, but the one suggestions which I always give from freshers to an 25 or 30 years of experience is your clear your concepts. That is an important part. So if your concepts are not clear around multiple services of Microsoft Azure, multiple platforms or topics or security or reliability and all of those things, if your concepts are not clear, you always got confused. I'll give you an example. Recently we have been interviewing for a lot of people in my previous organizations. When I They are the DevOps engineer, they're doing in and out deployment. When I ask them what is role based access control, I say I haven't worked on that. Then one of the people who is deployed in Terraform, like you're deploying in Terraform, yes. In a model, while creating the virtual network, you are giving some parameters. What are those parameters? He is not able to recall because everything is coming from code or from Terraform, so they might be getting it from the these things. So I'm not saying that you don't take the help of those tools and then enhance your knowledge, but you in the meantime it's your responsibilities. What are you going to build? At least review your code or review your Terraform script. What are the changes you are making where and why it is needed? And most important part, before building it up, build it manually. So when you build it manually, ask each and every steps that can you provide me a VM name? Can you provide me a disk? Can you provide me this? Can you provide a virtual network? Do you need DR? Do you need this? And all of those things. And you will get clear. And then you sorted what you needed, what you don't need it. And that is an important part. If your concepts are clear, I would say you don't need a certifications. But if you wanted to start, you can start with AG 900, build out your concepts, and then you can go with 104 and 305. But if you already have an experience on Microsoft Azure, you can directly start with 104 and then 305. In to become an architect, it's not the exam will make you an architect, it's your mindset.
Absolutely.
If you do not have an architectural mindset, your designations will be an architect, but you will never be an architect. So, architect is some things who is the problem solver, whether you know the skills or not. Let's say, uh, recently I was consulting with one of the companies. They come up with the problems. They have some of those issues in your app services and all of those things. I haven't worked on those. They show me the and whole life. I'm a BSc biology student, and that graduation is completed on that. I haven't seen that code. I said, "What are you trying to do?" And I, discuss about their product. What is the processes? How their processes and all of those things in place. And then when I looked out, I find out there's some issues in their development, and I told them the solutions. So sometimes you might not know or probably familiar with the product or the services or the technical skills, but if you are a problem solver and an architect, you would be aware that if this things has to be go this, and that will be the flow as in your best architect frameworks or whatsoever, and then that's where this is breaking. You might not be able to tell them exactly where it is missed in the code, but you tell them between this to this it is missing. Can you look out this the small piece of it? Because at that time they don't have to go with thousands of lines of code. They have to look down the smaller piece, test it out, and can quickly fix an issues probably in 30 minutes or 1 hour. And that's where the architect is become architect. So it's a mindset. And you should know all the services across platform, whether you worked or not, but you should be aware of that. And how you can find the solutions and implement. And that's a very pretty crucial role in the organizations as well. And that's it from
Sure.
this answer. If you have any other things.
Sure. Pratap, we have any follow-up questions to this, or audience has any question?
No, no questions from my. Yeah, I think all the questions you answered, Lalit.
Sure, perfect. All right, I think we this comes to an end to this amazing session, Lalit, and thank you so much for sharing such a valuable insights. We look forward to further more sessions, and thank you, Pratap, for helping making this session happen.
Okay, thank you.
Right, so all that with that, thank you everyone